Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Max Warframe. Today we're going to mix things up and do something I've not done in a while, which is to review a frame. Now I've had a bunch of messages in-game and on YouTube about a build for a very special lady, one that I've been using in my videos a lot recently, and that is Banshee. Now Banshee is a frame that is not exactly new to this game, having been released back in Update 7. However, she definitely seems to be one of the most underplayed frames in the game, with it being a very rare occasion that you'll ever see one in a mission, or requested in the recruiting channel. Now as I've said in previous videos, one of the things that I absolutely love about doing this YouTube content for you guys, is going back and revisiting weapons and frames that have sat in my arsenal since they were built, unused and unloved. And if I'm honest, Banshee was a frame that sat in my arsenal unplayed after the initial leveling. Recently though, I decided to dust her off and start using her again, and boy was I surprised. And I would go seriously so far as to say that she is one of, if not the most underrated frame in the game, especially now with the introduction of the Syndicate mods. Now before we go into too much detail as to why I love Banshee and why I feel that she is so awesome, let's have a quick look and remind ourselves of her powers. Banshee's first ability is called Sonic Boom, which is where she emits a shockwave that pushes targets in range with enough force to incapacitate or kill attackers. Now this is a very useful skill, and in all honesty, although the description says you can kill with it, unless you're at very low level, the chances of killing anything is so remote it's not even worth realistically considering. However, the secondary effect is where the usefulness of the ability lies. That is also going to knock down, push back, and even ragdoll enemies away in a 180-degree cone. Now this is especially useful against factions like the Infested, that are going to tend to swarm, but quite frankly it works fantastically well against all factions and is going to keep groups of enemies off their feet indefinitely, and at such a low energy cost it really can be spammed to keep those single targets or even entire groups of enemies stunned. It's also going to knock enemies off the world and into certain death, and will even knock off things like the backpacks off Grineer Hellions, making it a great counter to them when they land. So in essence, Sonic Boom is probably one of, if not the most efficient crowd control abilities in the game. Now her second ability is probably on my list of the top few abilities in the game, if not the top ability in the game, Sonar. Using acoustic location, Banshee's sonar power finds and tracks enemies and exposes critical weak spots to everyone in your squad. So what this actually means is that when casting sonar, it's going to mark a spot on an enemy that the ability then decides is a weak spot, and applies a damage multiplier to it. Now those of you that are not familiar with Banshee will probably not believe the strength of the damage multiplier. It's not 200% like Nova's damage multiplier. With maximum power strength on, and hitting a sonar spot with a weapon, you're going to be doing an extra 1420% damage. That is an absolutely insane number, and seriously not something to be forgotten about when you're talking about strongest abilities in the game. Sonar also marks enemies on the map, so your teammates have an early warning about approaching enemy units. In effect, it has a built-in enemy radar as well. Now the thing about Sonar is that it can be recast, which means that it can be useful even in boss fights. Take T4 missions for example, and the Void Vor boss. The only area you can hit him is in the gap in his torso. So say for example you cast Sonar and it lands on his arm, it's going to be completely useless there. You can keep recasting until it lands on that gap in his torso, and then it goes down faster than you can imagine. I've actually one-shotted Vor with my Marelock before after getting a lucky hit with my sonar. My team didn't even realise he'd spawned and died until I told them in the chat. Sonar is probably the most underused and underappreciated abilities in the game, and I've literally no idea why. Sonar spots dealing an extra 1420% damage are automatically hit by AoE weapons like the Penta and the Ignis, and creates an enemy radar effect. Seems like an immensely and insanely useful skill to me. The best thing about it is that with the introduction of the second wave of the Syndicate mods, it got even better. Now Resonance is the Syndicate mod for Sonar, and can be acquired from the Cephalon Suda and the Perrin Sequence Syndicate stores for 25,000 standing, and is a significant boost to the way sonar works. The way this mod works is that every time someone gets a kill using a sonar spot, including any of your teammates, it will in effect trigger another sonar, with the duration being affected by the amount of time left you have on the original sonar. So for example, someone gets a kill using a sonar spot with 20 seconds left on the original. It's going to trigger another sonar with the duration being 20 seconds on the new sonar spot. Now the thing about this mod is, essentially as people get more and more kills with sonar spots, more and more sonar spots appear on other units, making it easier to hit sonar spots. Now what this means is that the effectiveness of the Resonance mod has actually got an exponential curve on it as to its usefulness. Now where this comes in even more useful is when people use things like AoE weapons on things, which are always going to hit sonar spots, such as the Ignis for example, or the Penta. On factions like the Infested, this can lead to some insane amounts of sonar spots on a single target, fairly often resulting in some enemies running towards you, essentially nothing more than a walking sonar spot. I have however left the best part of this for last, and that is the sonar spots can overlap each other, stacking the damage buff. Whilst using the Ignis, which isn't exactly known for being the highest damaging weapon of all time, I saw numbers going up to 194,000 on a normal non-critical hit, which is absolutely insane numbers. So in essence, sonar is an insane damage boost, and when combined with resonance, it rewards accuracy in a way that absolutely no other ability does. Now moving on to Banshee's third ability, and that is called Silence, which surrounds Banshee in an aura that stuns enemies and will limit their perceptions and tactical response to gunfire and Warframe attacks. Now what this actually means is in reality, it's slightly different. Silence is a pretty awesome crowd control ability which causes around a 3 or 4 second stun as they are hit with sonic interference. But the ability doesn't stop after the stun has finished. Every enemy affected by this will not be able to detect gunshots, alarms or death screams of fallen friendlies. They are still going to be able to see you however, so playing this smart is the key to success. Casting and then picking off enemy units seems to be the most effective way of doing this, using either stealth to perform takedowns, since unalerted units are affected by silence, they gain the stealth damage multiplier, or you can take them out from range using any weapon that you choose. I use this ability for the majority of the time for the stun, so seriously boosting the duration on my solo build is not something that I really want to do. Now like Sonar, Silence also has an augment mod, Savage Silence, which causes enemy affected by Silence to take increased finisher damage, either from being down on the floor or down to the stealth attacks. Personally, I'm not really a fan of this mod. Firstly, as I've said in previous videos, I'm not really a melee player. But in all honesty, this mod isn't going to do anything for me. But also, it really doesn't fit into the theme of Banshee. She really is a long-range caster, and her horrendous survivability and general squishiness really don't play into a melee style at all, and actually is more of a hindrance than a help. So pretty much Silence is a great help for survivability, especially with that stun, and when played, will and can help you take on a map completely undetected. It's a really powerful tool, but it just has to be used right. Banshee's fourth ability is called Soundquake. Channeling all of her acoustic energy into the environment, Banshee uses ultrasonic reverberations to violently shake the ground. Now what this means is that Banshee is going to go into an unmovable state and will radiate out sonic energy from her position, dealing blast damage to enemies caught within the area of effect, also staggering them. Soundquake is a toggleable ability, meaning that she can drop in and out of it when she pleases. Now this is a fantastic tool to help with things like covering allies when reviving down Tenno, or to deal with a heavy unit that would otherwise deal a huge amount of damage to your team, or protecting a cryopod against waves of infested. Soundquake is a reasonable skill against most factions, although as you can imagine it's most effective against the infestation. Now it doesn't come without some risks, however. Primarily is that Banshee is not invulnerable during the period of casting Soundquake. Now while this is not an issue with the majority of the close range infested units, or melee units of the factions, this can be a real problem for ranged units, because if they're outside of the stun range from Soundquake, Banshee can be shot upon by those ranged units. And because of her lack of survivability, she really doesn't last long under any form of sustained fire at all. So the correct use of Soundquake really is necessary. Okay, so now we've looked at the abilities of Banshee, let's move on to looking at how we're going to mod her. Now she comes with 2 Vs in the normal slots and a V slot for her aura. Now what we're going to do is going to add 4 Forma to Banshee. We're going to change the V slot in the aura to a dash, and we're going to add in a dash and a V and a D. So that's all 4 Forma right there. Now this first build is probably my most used team-based build, which is Energy Siphon, Transient Fortitude and Blind Rage for power strength, Redirection to get my shields up, Fleeting Expertise for efficiency, Primed Continuity for duration combined with the Narrow-Minded also for duration. We've got Overextended for power range, and then we've got our Syndicate mod, we've got Resonance here. And this is going to give you about 940% power strength, and obviously the ability to move that sonar around using the Resonance mod. Now having a look at the build, this is the build that I use pretty much for leveling my weapons, which is a max power strength build. Now I actually take this into things like Tower 4 Interception with unranked weapons. Now a few of you have sort of asked how I manage to level these weapons. I go into higher end content with completely unranked weapons and this build, just because it absolutely maximizes the damage output of the weapon and can actually drag a weapon that is very mediocre into very high level content just by using the sonar. So we've got Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude and Intensify all on here. We've got Fleeting Expertise for efficiency. We've got Primed Continuity and Streamline, because in things like Tower 4 Interception they come in waves, which means that we really don't need a max duration build on here, but what we do need is to make the sonar as cheap as possible to cast. This combining with the Arcane helmet that I've got as well, which also increases power efficiency, means that I can actually cast it very often. And then because Banshee is fairly squishy, we've got Redirection and Vitality on there as well. Now going on to my sort of everyday solo build, we've got Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude, Redirection and Vitality, Fleeting Expertise, Primed Continuity, Overextended, and then we've got the Resonance on there as well. And this I find is to be a very, very good, very well rounded build. When you're doing solo maps, things like Exterminates, things like Sabotages, you don't really want a max duration build, just because you're moving very, very quickly. So having max duration really isn't going to be too much use, especially on things like Sonar, which is a very static ability. Obviously it's going to help with silence, but since you're moving very quickly anyway, you're going to be affecting so many different groups of people with your silence and with that stun, that you can just run through the map very, very quickly, just recasting it when you actually need to. Okay, and so now on to my feelings and whether I feel that Banshee is worth the effort and the time invested into her. And the answer is absolutely yes, I do. She is an absolute powerhouse, a forgotten frame in a game with so many memorable ones, that seriously brings a different level, a different dynamic to every style of play. Whether low level, killing using her sonic boom, running around solo using her silence to keep her alive, or boosting her team's damage at very high level survival and defense using her sonar, she has a place in pretty much any team, provided people give her a chance. People see Banshee as a frame in need of a buff, as one of the Warframe's most useless frames. But quite frankly, and I would argue until I was blue in the face, that Banshee is one of the most balanced and more useful frames that you can actually bring to a team. And I've showed in the build there's a ton of flexibility with her. And when the augment mod gets its own specific slot, which, if I'm honest, I do fully expect to happen at some point, then the flexibility with her build further increases, since there's actually going to be another mod slot to play with. And even still, the requirements for Banshee are not too problematic either, with the player only really needing to be a member of a clan with the specific research done. So compared to a lot of frames, she's actually pretty easy to get. However, she is by no means an easy frame to play, but once you've mastered her difficult playstyle, you'll never regret it. So to summarise, amazing damage potential, great crowd controllability, and great team synergy with her abilities. Banshee is probably the most underrated frame in this game, and for sure, the most forgotten. But although forgotten, never to be underestimated. As always, a quick thing from me, apologies about the sporadic nature of the videos. Unfortunately, immediately after getting my new keyboard, since the last one had died, I managed to get one video made and released. Since then I've actually had a bit of an accident that's actually meant that a few doctor's visits and a trip to the hospital, so hopefully from today my videos are going to get released once a day again, and regularly. Hopefully the worst of the broken up timing is behind me now, but I also want to say a huge Happy New Year to all you guys all around the globe, and I hope that you had a great evening and wish you all the best for 2015. As always guys, many thanks for watching. Please don't forget to leave a like and to subscribe, it helps me out a ton, and I shall see you in the next episode.